Before I get into the bulk of this video, I just wanted to say how much I hate broadcast blackouts. Just because the other night I was gonna watch the Lakers Clippers game because it seemed really interesting to me, and then of course when I actually got to the broadcast after like the first couple of minutes, it cut out and said how I was not in my area. And I hope going forward they really get rid of those kind of broadcast blackout deals, especially for all the other future leagues like MLB, NHL. I know a lot of them are getting new TV deals soon, so I hope that really gets resolved soon. So I hope you enjoy the rest of this video.
Three. He throws to the end zone. Davis 4-3 in the win. Oh, it's good. Crosby in on goal. Backhander. He scores. And good. 49ers win it.
Hello everybody. How are we all doing today? Hope we're all doing good. So today I was mostly going to talk about the MLB, and I still mostly will, but I'm also going to throw in some extra topics in there. So without further ado, I'm not going to really waste too much time on an intro. So let's start kind of how the MLB season is going so far. Obviously, we're only a weekend. We're only like 6-7 games, depending on how much games your teams have played so far. But of course, the beginning of a new season, a lot of new changes that obviously happened this offseason. So, I wouldn't say if you're a fan of one of these teams that have a little bit of a slow start, don't worry too badly just because there's 162 games in this season, especially for the MLB. So here are some really interesting ones that have kind of happened recently. So at the time of writing this video, I know they are playing a game against the Reds right now, but at the time of recording this video, the Phillies have 1 win and 5 losses. The Mariners and Astros both have losing records in the AL West. The Rays are 6-0 undefeated so far. And the Padres are tied with the Rockies for the bottom of the NL West, and the Cardinals are also at the bottom of the NL Central. So, obviously, I'm going to just kind of attribute a bunch of those just to slow starts. Obviously, not everyone's really rushing out to get to a great start, especially if you're playing some good teams, and then there's still so much more games in the season. So, but obviously, there's some other ones that are a little bit more interesting to me, especially I'm going to start off with the Phillies. They've had a bunch of problems to kind of start off the season. Their superstar hitter Bryce Harper is still out. I believe he should be back soon, but still he hurt his elbow last year and he needed surgery, so he's gonna take some time to come back. And I know Rhys Hoskins, who was their I believe their first baseman, got hurt, and then he got hurt with a torn ACL especially, so he's gonna be out for the whole year. And then their pitching staff is there's so many injuries across the board for them. And obviously I understand a lot of people are kind of writing them off or starting to really doubt them, even though it's really early in the season, just because they just came off a World Series appearance. They won the National League last year, so the expectations really got raised for them after they made that big run. And if you're a Phillies fan or if you're just kind of interested in them, my main thing would just be, gotta wait for Bryce Harper to come back. He was like one of the big engines last year for that big World Series push, and then he hit obviously that massive home run against the Padres, I believe in Game 5 or 6, I forgot which one. So getting him back is going to help your team a lot. And then another thing will just have to be, I'm pretty sure as the season goes on, having him will help that offense, because right now it's really tricky. Sometimes we'll put up a bunch of runs, sometimes only like 2 or 3 in a game. And then just have to kind of wait for the roster to get healthy, really. I know it's not anything too crazy, but there's just so much injury, especially for their pitching, which have a bunch of runs, like 11 runs to the Rangers, I believe, on their opening day. So, and then I know they've allowed double-digit runs for, I believe, a couple of the games. So you have to really just kind of hope the pitching gets better with just having guys really being able to get healthy for the rest of the season, of course. But on the other side of the things, of winning, we have the Rays so far, and they've been on complete fire. They had no problems opening the season up. They came out of the gates firing. They're 6-0 right now. The only thing is, though, when I kind of looked into why they were 6-0, the only caveat would just be they're playing guys like the Tigers, Nationals, the A's. So obviously not the cream of the crop competition, but they have to wait for a week or so they can play the Blue Jays, who are probably going to be the first really solid team they go up against. But still, even if they've played against a bunch of kind of soft opponents, if you will, they've been winning convincingly. That's the main thing. They've won by at least 4 runs in all of their games, and they've been obviously the Rays are not really like a popular team by any means, even if they've had really consistent good seasons, even if they've made a playoff a bunch of times for a while now. People just kind of sleep on them and kind of underrate them just because they're just not really as marketable as some like the other bigger teams in the MLB. But even so they've been dominating, even if, as I mentioned before, they're playing against some softer teams. they're still winning by 4 or more runs every game so far. And when you have guys like Randy Arozarena, who was an absolute beast for Team Mexico in the World Baseball Cup, and then Wander Franco is healthy right now. He's averaging a 41 batting average right now, so it's really cool to see he's healthy. Hope the main thing with him, obviously, and the Rays is if they can keep Shane McCutcheon, a lot of those guys fully healthy, I think there'll be a really big threat in the AL, and they might even win the division. The only thing is, obviously, the Yankees are there. They have the I know the Jays are interesting, and so are the Orioles. But I think just because the Yankees have a bunch of injuries to their starting pitchers already, and if the Rays manages to stay healthy, I think they can really have a shot to win the AL East. But kind of moving on from the Rays for a little bit, we have obviously my team. I'm a big Dodgers fan, so obviously I'm not gonna kind of overreact to anything right now. I'd still say we're doing pretty well. Obviously, I'm not sure how we're gonna do for the rest of the seasons because we did lose some guys like Trey Turner. We lost Justin Turner. Really reliable guys, of course. Obviously, there's some other guys that we lost, which I'm not sure if like a guy like Andrew Haney, he was just injury prone. Obviously, we lost Cody Bellinger. Some more losses as well. So obviously the team is changing a lot. But I'm pleasantly surprised to see the guys we did pick up. They're not playing bad at all. First, Jason Hayward. He's averaging around 30% batting average, and he's had 2 home runs, 2 and 4 RBIs this season. And for how he's played the last couple of years and the start of this year, I'm really glad to see he's been doing well for the Dodgers. I know the Dodgers hitting staff, they generally do a really good job with most players who are at least willing to kind of listen to the training and hear them. I understand there are some players like a Cody Bellinger who after a while Cody Bellinger just didn't really see eye to eye. That's a big reason why he didn't get that player option picked up, and that's why he's on the Cubs now. And so I'm just glad to see an older player like a Jason Hayward doing really good for us. The next player I want to talk about for the Dodgers who's been doing pretty good. This is not surprising for me because I've been kind of seeing his praises for a minute, and I know a couple videos ago I did talk about him in the intro, but James Allman's a beast. 35% batting average, 6 RBIs. He's a rookie, and I think his play will get even better as the season goes on. Just because, obviously, we've only had a couple. It's like a 7-game sample, so it's really not anything too crazy that I can base a whole season off of. But still, I know last year he was hitting like 41%. Obviously, I don't think he'll hit that in his rookie season, but I imagine as he gets more acclimated to, especially with all the new rule changes, and then of course the just getting used to playing MLB big league pitchers and all that stuff, I think he'll get even better. But kind of speaking about those MLB changes, a lot of the rule changes, I'm gonna kind of talk about them right now. So a lot of these rule changes have been kind of experimented on in the AAA and some of the lower divisions of the MLB. So obviously some of the younger players are not going to be as affected by it, but I still want to talk about these because I think it's really interesting how they brought a lot of these rules. So first, I'm going to talk about obviously the big one, the pitch clock, which so far the main thing that we've seen from the pitch clock that is objectively there is that it's decreased the amount of play time for an MLB game by like 30 minutes. Last year it was over 3 hours, like 3 hours and some change. Right now for a 9-inning game, assuming not no extra innings, this year it's a 2-hour 38-minute average time, which cuts down almost half an hour, 20 minutes or so. And there's a lot of new rules that obviously got put in effect, and to have all these new rules put into the MLB all at once is pretty big. I'm not gonna lie. Obviously, everyone knows it's big, but this is the best way I'd put it, just because like the big rules. Obviously, there's a pitcher / batter clock. It affects both equally. They're bigger bases now. No defensive shifts allowed. New pickoff system. Those are like the big changes, and then to have all those things implemented in one season at once, instead of kind of having maybe the pickoff system 1 year and then the next year's bigger bases and the next year's kind of like the pitch clock, kind of spreading them out so it's not like all at once. They kind of decided, let's just do it all at once. And the closest thing I would imagine this would be like is if instead of if in the NBA they widened the court, put in a shot clock, put in the 3-point shot, and got rid of defensive hand checking in one season. Like imagine if they did that in one season instead of spreading that out after multiple years. That would have been like just such a big change for the NBA, and it's kind of how I'd imagine baseball is right now. Is because the amount of rules put in, it's kind of really hard to see which rules are actually really impacting the game more than people might think it is, or just because I know the main rule everyone's talking about is the pitch clock, but it's really hard to tell if, like, an example would just be stolen bases right now. Stolen bases and steals are up like 10%, I believe, and then their success rate is also up around 10% as well. So the main thing is that I'm not sure. There's a lot of different reasons why this could be. It's because obviously bigger bases means it takes a little less time to get to the base. Also, now there's a pitch clock, which means pitchers are obviously more worried about getting to the next pitch rather than just taking their time. It's kind of seeing how the runners are moving, of course, and then even more so than that, there's of course a new pickoff system, which basically means that if you don't pick off a runner within 3 tries, they basically move on to the next base, which has kind of flown under the radar, but that's a new thing as well. And of course, as I mentioned before, pitch clock increases the tempo. So there's so many different rules that kind of all happen at once. It's hard to really pinpoint which one is actually causing all this stuff. So it's really interesting. It's going to be really interesting to see, of course, going into the season, especially as I'd imagine more and more players get used to it, just because there's a lot of shenanigans with pitchers throwing the ball before batters get set and the clock, and then of course pitching violations, all that kind of stuff is still happening just because it's still new. So we'll really have to see on especially how it's going to impact later season games where it's going to matter a little bit more, and of course the postseason. But of course that's what I have to kind of say about all the new MLB rule changes. Just a bunch of stuff kind of going on, and just a bunch of chaos really, just because new season, new rules, bunch of players kind of getting acclimated in new spots. But one thing that has not changed at all in the world of sports is the Aaron Rodgers, Lamar Jackson stuff, just because even like last week or the week before when I really talked about both Rodgers and Lamar Jackson being traded, nothing has happened, and based on rumors and reports, nothing is going to happen. So we're all going to have to kind of, best way I can put it is we're going to have to sit tight a little bit, just because based on what a lot of insiders are saying, we have to wait at least maybe until the NFL draft to kind of see what's going on for a trade or development for someone to kind of pick up one of these QBs. Just because a lot of teams that seem to be a little bit more interested in Lamar Jackson, they are going to have like a team kind of like the Colts or maybe even like the Patriots. They can trade up possibly to get a new quarterback if that's going to be the case. And there's 4 quarterback prospects which are pretty much slated to go in the first round and pretty early on in the first round. So if you want a new QB, and imagine you can just trade for a QB instead of trading with the Ravens, who can just offer your deal anyways. And then with the new QB, they're not going to be paid as much, and then you have your 5th-year option, so you have a lot more control over them rather than trying to trade for someone. My bad. That is obviously going to cost a lot more, and then their team still seems to be pretty interested to see on if they can hold on to them or not. With the Rodgers stuff, it's just a lot more of a stalemate, really, just because it's pretty obvious that if he's going to get traded out, unless something wild happens, like I'm going to report the Niners are going to trade for him, but I might talk about that in a future video, but I don't see that happening at all, just because the Packers seem adamant on not trading him to the NFC, and Trey Lance and Brock Purdy and Sam Darnold seem to be obviously a lot more in tune for fighting for the starting job rather than just bringing in Aaron Rodgers. Even though we already traded so much for Trey Lance, it doesn't make sense for us to trade even more stuff for Rodgers. But anyways, back to my main point. Right now, it's pretty obvious the Jets and the Packers are both trying to outwit each other to get Aaron Rodgers, because it's obvious that Aaron Rodgers might also retire at the end of the day. And the Packers, for their perspective, they know the Jets desperately need to trade for a star quarterback, just because as of today, of course, they have the longest playoff drought in North American pro sports. The Sacramento Kings got their playoff spot recently, so the Jets haven't made the playoffs since 2011. That's almost 12 years ago now, which time flies. So they haven't made the playoffs in 12 years. They're desperate to make a splash in the playoffs, try to win the division, and getting Aaron Rodgers is easily their best way on doing both of those things. So the Packers have a bunch of leverage in. They know they need Aaron Rodgers, and they know they can probably get a couple picks out of them. The problem is, though, that Aaron Rodgers is in his late 30s, going to his 40s in a couple years. So the Jets have leverage in the fact Aaron Rodgers is an old quarterback, aging quarterback, and they're not going to give up a bunch of assets for a QB who, even who said going into this offseason he was pretty much retired, until the Jets had to kind of convince him not to be retired to play for them. So it's going to be hard for the Packers or the Jets to really get more leverage, because Aaron Rodgers is old, but the Jets need him a lot. So it kind of really cancels out. And the Packers seem really interested in trying to get one of the Jets picks this year. Only problem is that the Jets are pretty adamant not trading a first round pick, especially this year. Maybe in the future, if they just, if not, I'd imagine they only want to trade maybe a second and a third, if that, just because trading a first round, especially with how valuable they are in today's drafts, I don't imagine them doing that for Aaron Rodgers, especially if he only plays for 1 or 2 years and then retires anyways, as basically a rental for Aaron Rodgers, and trading a first round pick, which can be a valuable player for both those teams. I don't imagine they do that because they're not. It's not like the Jets of old, who they'd probably make a dumb decision at this point or try to force things. They're gonna wait a little bit. So, unfortunately for us fans, especially as in today's world where we're just waiting and waiting and waiting, we're always hearing rumors, we're always hearing things about Aaron Rodgers, but I don't see anything happening until at least the draft, where I don't see the Jets trading unless they get an absolute, like, they get Rodgers for like a third or second. So that's what I have to kind of say about those. And it's kind of same thing with Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson's obviously much more valuable because he's younger, but the problem is the teams who would be in the market to kind of get him, they seem to be a little bit more interested in just drafting a quarterback on like a Will Levis, Richardson, Young, Stroud, whoever falls to them based on how things kind of go. I'll talk about that in a second, rather than just trying to pay him a bunch of money and then the Ravens match it, or trading him from the Ravens at all. But of course, I kind of alluded to the fact that there was some kind of a little bit of a draft mirage kind of going on earlier, just though because in more NFL draft related news, I saw some interesting reports I want to talk about. Just because the Panthers are putting out a really obvious smokescreen, in my opinion, about picking Bryce Young, just because it seemed really obvious that they were really interested in Ohio State CJ Stroud a little bit more than Bryce Young, just because they were talking about him. They talked about playing golf with him when he does come to Carolina, and made it seem as an inevitability rather than maybe something that can happen when they talked about it, especially in the clips I did see. So I think the thing with the Carolina Panthers is that I don't see them drafting Bryce Young, just because it's not even a knock on Bryce Young. Bryce Young is easily the most pro-ready quarterback in this draft. Even though I don't think his ceiling could be as high as some of the other guys, he's still the most pro-ready, and I still think he has the highest floor easily and obviously. But I don't think a team will sign a guy like Andy Dalton for more than 2 years for more than backup money. I forgot the exact figures, but it wasn't like a $2 million or less contract. It was a good amount of money, so it's obvious they do plan on probably starting Andy Dalton for a couple of years. So I imagine they would draft someone with a little bit more, I guess you can say, upside, like a Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, than like a Bryce Young. Just because I don't think you pick up Andy Dalton just to have Bryce Young sit. You'd probably just rather draft another backup QB instead and just start Bryce Young from the get-go. And of course, the Panthers have also said they floated the idea that they wouldn't mind trading down if they got a good enough offer. So the way I kind of see, if obviously this does happen, the way I'm kind of seeing this go in the future would just be the Panthers are saying they're going to be drafting Bryce Young, and they're going to try to get the Houston Texans to kind of panic and trade up with them. They just go down to 2. They draft probably CJ Stroud or Richardson or whoever they actually want to get, and then they get more picks they can help the QB they got going forward. Just because they did kind of give up a lot to draft number one, just because if you guys remember, they traded away DJ Moore, who would have been a really nice wide receiver 1, especially for a rookie QB. So I'd imagine they probably want to recoup some of the assets and then draft another wide receiver 1, or just more help in general for whoever they do get going forward. So that's what I kind of say about that. I thought it was really interesting, just because I just saw it was like really obvious that they're trying to just put out like a big smoke show so they can say we're gonna get Bryce Young, so they can kind of make the Texans panic. And I'm not sure if the Texans or any of the other NFL GMs are buying it, because I'm not really buying it. But at the same time, they obviously would know much more about what the Panthers want to do and what QBs they've talked to, all that kind of stuff, than I would, for example, just because I'm just a guy who talks on YouTube. So we'll really have to see how that could go going forward. But I would not be surprised if they do trade down once again with the Texans. The Texans draft Bryce Young. I feel no matter what, the Texans want to draft Bryce Young, and it makes the most sense for them, just because he's the most pro-ready and he's going to help their team just from the get-go, rather than having to wait and like a Will Levis, a Richardson. I love those two guys, and I'll talk more about those maybe in a future video where I do like a mock draft or just talk about QBs in this draft. I love those guys, but they need some more time to sit. They need to learn a little bit more, kind of get some more things are flying. Bryce Young, he's gonna be good just from the start. You're not gonna have to sit him is kind of what I'm getting at. While some of the other guys, or CJ Stroud too, but I just imagine Bryce Young would just be more pro ready than all those guys. So I would really want to see if the Texans trade up, if they just stay pat, and then the Panthers do draft Bryce Young, and I'll be completely wrong on that. So a lot of interesting things to go for with the NFL draft. But switching gears a little bit, again, once more, I'm gonna be talking a little bit about the NBA right now. Just because playoffs right now. So first thing I want to talk about would just be I do plan on making like first round predictions, playing tournament predictions probably pretty soon. I just want to see the final standing, the final matchups, because the only matchups I do know it's gonna happen for either conference is gonna be the Knicks and the Cavs are not going to move from 4 and 5, so we will be seeing them play in the first round. But a bunch of other teams right now, the Nuggets I think they can move down to number 2 seed. I'm not really sure. I know the Suns are stuck in the 4 seed, so there's a lot of movement that can happen. It's obviously going to happen. Impact a lot of first round matchups, and then we have to wait for the plan, see who actually makes it out of there, and then we'll see who actually is going to be playing in the playoffs. So once that is fully settled, I'll talk more about that then. But right now, the first topic I really wanted to discuss would be Zion Williamson. He's a superstar for the Pelicans, and it sucks that from the reports Shams Charania threw out there, he's gonna be at least missing the playing tournament and possibly the playoffs. Even though if you guys remember correctly, he was supposed to be only missing a few weeks after the All-Star break, which it sucks just because Zion would single-handedly make the Pelicans a really deadly low seed, just because I think a lot more. This is obviously a lot more impactful for today's NBA, but it's a lot more. They just want to make it into the playoffs and to see what their superstars can do there, rather than trying to get like 1 seed or higher or whatever. Just because if they do make it to the playoffs and have Zion healthy, that's a big. Like, I would not want to play them, especially for like the Nuggets or the Grizzlies. Playing an A seed with, obviously they're gonna have Zion. They have Jonas Valanciunas, CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, Dyson Daniels, Herb Jones, Jose Alvarado. They have a lot of guys that can play. So playing them in the first round, that's going to be a really hard matchup no matter who plays against them. So, and the only thing if they don't have Zion, I don't think they're as much of a threat, obviously, just because even though last year they played against the Phoenix Suns, who were the first seed, they gave them all they could. It just wasn't enough. They had Zion. They probably might even win that series because we all know the Suns collapsed against the Mavericks, and Zion is that good of a player that he can make the difference. But the only problem is he's a great player. Everyone knows how good he is. He averages almost like 26 points per game off like 60% field goal percentage. So we all know the beast he is, especially offensively. But if he's only playing 40 games a season since he got drafted, it's not really a good sign of things to come. It's because we all know if you start off playing that much, only that little games a season, and as you get older, you're going to be missing even more games. So there's going to be a lot of discussions, I'd imagine, just if they want to trade him or what they're going to do, because they gave him all that money already, even though he had not played that much games. They gave him that extension, so they're going to be with him for a while. So I don't know if they want to just trade him, trying to get some picks back, and then use those picks to help the rest of the Pelicans cores, because it's really obvious this team is built for Zion, but if Zion's not there, there's not a point in building around a player who's not going to even play not even half their game. So we'll really have to see what the Pelicans can do, and it's just kind of concerning, just because obviously I really want to see Zion in healthy for a playoff series. Like if they do make it like the 7th seed or whatever, like a Grizzlies Zion matchup would be really fun. Grizzlies Pelicans matchup, Zion versus Jaw, all those kind of and all their supporting casts against each other. That would be one hell of a playoff series, especially for the first round. I think the West of playoffs are going to be really intense. So having like a playoff series has a bunch of narratives. The number 1 overall pick versus the number 2 overall pick, like so on and so forth. I would have been really interesting, just because the fact Zion Williamson's probably going to miss his another postseason run in a row. That's going to be really interesting to see on what they're going to do with him, just because I'm not sure if they can really get rid of him, just on the basis that I'm not sure if they're going to be in position to even get another superstar at his caliber to the draft or free agency, just because I don't think they're bad enough to really get one of those high picks to get like a Scoot Henderson, Miller from Alabama, or of course Victor W. So we really have to see if the Pelicans they just want to hope that Zion Williamson, maybe he loses some weight, maybe he kind of changes his regimen a little bit and he plays at least 60 games going forward if they want to bank on that, or they just want to maybe even move on from him. I have no idea, but that's one thing that's going to be really interesting to see going forward, because the Pelicans right now, I believe they're kind of like in the play-in mix, so we'll really have to see if they even make it out of the plan, and if they don't make it out the plan, I'd imagine for sure there's going to be a lot more like media attention, a lot more like narratives, a lot more kind of an outburst against Zion not playing these really important games. And if they do, and they do make it past like the first round, or if they at least put up a really good fight against like a really high seed to follow Zion, then it's gonna be a lot more if they should just build around someone else, because I don't think the roster is that bad at all. But the only problem is their superstars not playing, and they can't. And it's such a superstar league as the NBA, it's really hard to kind of gauge the results from there. So we'll have to see about that going forward. The next main thing, I have a lot to kind of say about this, will just be Dallas Mavericks. Obviously, right now they're really struggling. They're like 38 and 42. They're like barely, and like kind of like outside the outside looking in for like the playing picture. But originally this was not something I had in mind. But I kind of checked out something recently, and obviously to kind of give some context, the Mavericks have been really disappointing this whole season, really. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But at the very least, they still have I believe the Thunder lose one more game, and if they win out, they can at least make the plan, trying to hope they can see if they can do something from there. The problem is, if they lose this game against the Bulls, it's over. They're basically going to go to Cancun, miss the playoffs entirely. And in this must-win game, like, there's no other way around. If they lose this game, they're not making the play, they're not making the playoffs, nothing. They're sitting Kyrie Irving, Tim Hardaway, Josh Green, Maxi Kleber, and Christian Wood. And Josh Green and Maxi Kleber or Christian Wood, my bad, are both out because of rest and not because of any injuries, which obviously doesn't make sense, because you do all this stuff, you want to obviously make the playoffs, and then you're going to be sitting two of your best players. That just really stings, especially if you're a Dallas Mavericks fan. And of course, if they do lose, they keep their top 10 pick. And so about their pick, so basically, if they do lose, they get a top 10 pick. They can keep their pick. If they win, and they'll get the 11th overall pick, I believe, and then the Knicks get to take their pick away from them because the Kristaps Porzingis trade, which he's not even on the roster anymore, and they're still having to give up assets for New York depending on how things go, which obviously sucks. And here's my main thing: if the Mavericks if they were gonna tank so they can keep their pick, I'm not sure why they made the moves they did. I don't think they were planning on the kind of how things went south, just because if they were gonna tank, why did they trade away 2 first-round picks, I believe, and then they traded away Dorian Finney-Smith and Spencer Dinwiddie, who were both really valuable contributors to the Mavericks, for Kyrie Irving. And then why would they do that if they were going to take anyways? Like, at that point, just rest those players up, and then you get to keep your future picks, and then you don't have to kind of deal with all the Kyrie Irving media, all that kind of drama. And then so that's why it's kind of confused me. I don't know what the point, if they're going to do this right now, I'm not sure what the point of bringing Kyrie Irving was, trading away all those assets, if just because he's a free agent after the season's over. So it's not like you have him for next year that he's running back. Hopefully everyone's healthy. No, he's out. I'm not saying he's out of Dallas necessarily, but if he wants to go, he wants to go. Like, you can't really control that. So they traded 2 picks. They traded away a couple players for like half a season, maybe like the postseason for Kyrie Irving. And if you're not even gonna try to make the postseason, you basically traded away for like a bunch of picks, a bunch of assets for like 2 months of Kyrie Irving, and that just doesn't make sense, because everyone knows that when you bring Kyrie Irving in, you're taking a risk, because obviously there's a bunch of off-the-court antics I'm not going to get into, but you're hoping that what he does on the court, his ball handling skills, everything, obviously just negates all of like the off-the-court stuff, all that stuff. So I don't know why you're going to take that big risk, really, and then just tank. That doesn't really make sense to me. And going forward, it's just they got worse, because they gave up a lot for a player who's not gonna be there in a couple months probably. I don't know if he does go back. They're probably gonna have to pay him like a fully guaranteed $100 million plus contract, just because I don't see Kyrie Irving coming back. He obviously wanted to go to the Lakers, team up with LeBron James, who's his guy over there, or probably another team. And just in general, I don't see him going back to Dallas, because it was obvious he only got there because Joe Tsai didn't want him to go to a place he wanted to go. So I don't really see how this really worked out for the Mavs in any way. They traded a bunch of assets for like not even half a season of Kyrie Irving, and then of course going forward, this kind of frustrates me just because I feel this is super just disingenuous, I guess is the word, for viewers and fans on even players, because when the playoffs, they still have at least a shot to make the play-in. They can see what Luka, Kyrie, can do in the playoff series. They can do what in the postseason, of course, in the play-in, because I know it doesn't really count as a playoffs, but still kind of postseason. But by resting all of these players, you're basically just saying they're waving the white flag. They're done. They don't want to see what they can do. They just want to get their top 10 pick, which I'll get into that for a second. But I think it just sucks just because if they want to bring back Kyrie Irving, which I'm pretty sure they're planning on doing, if they traded away all those picks, they're not going to let him go. And if they do, that makes that trade even look even worse. You at least want to see what Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic can do in the playoff series, because the Mavericks, they play at a pretty slow pace, and then you have two of the best scorers in the NBA right now, two of the best ISO scorers especially. At the very least, you probably want to see what your superstar duo, especially if you want to keep them for the future, you want to see what they can do in the play-in playoffs, see what they can do in a 7-game series. But I don't think the Mavericks management wants to do that at all, and it's obvious it's not going to happen because they're tanking this game, and if they lose, they're out of the playoffs. So, and then if you're gonna tank for a pick, if you're gonna tank, just you should have done it way earlier. Just shut down guys, because could have at least maybe gone like 7th, 8th, just depending on how things go. Just because only a 10th overall pick, like, it's not gonna help that much, is because obviously the first 3 picks are gonna be superstars, maybe top 5 as well. But after like maybe like the 8th, 9th, 10th pick above, you're looking for like role players at that point. Hopefully you can find someone better than that, but especially with how top-heavy a lot of NBA drafts have been, the first 5 picks or so are generally where like the superstars are, like your franchise guys, and after that, like the elite role players, and it's role players, and kind of bench guys, so on and so forth. So trying to do all that stuff just to get the 10th overall pick is not gonna help that much, really. So I'm really not sure what the Mavericks were planning. If they're probably hoping that Kyrie Irving would have brought a bigger spark than actually did, but I felt because they gave up Dinwiddie and DFS, that's just so much picks, so much players that were really big contributors, because DFS is like a big 3-and-D guy, and Dinwiddie's he's a pretty good second option. So once again, just they probably didn't really think that trade through. They just wanted another superstar, but they gave up a lot of depth, and their depth was already kind of questionable before, so that really did not help them at all. So it's just one of those kind of deals where I just didn't like that trade, just because you're giving up a bunch of assets, a bunch of things for a player who might just leave in like a couple months anyways, and then of course you're not even gonna make the playoffs with taking that big risk. You're gonna tank going to like the off season, and that just really sucks, because obviously as fans, I'm imagining the majority of people want to see Luka and Kyrie playing the playoff series, especially against who knows who they actually match up against, like let's say Jokic, Jamal Murray and the Nuggets, or Ja and all those guys in Memphis. That would have been at least pretty fun to see. Let's see what Luka and Kyrie can do, especially. We know they're both big playoff performers, so let's see what they could have done. But of course, because they want like the only like the 10th overall pick, they're gonna tank. And as I mentioned before, if they're gonna tank, they should have just done it sooner and just not traded away a bunch of future picks anyways, because if this doesn't work out and the roster is not really working on the future, I'm pretty sure Brooklyn's going to be eating on those picks, because they're going to be drafting a bunch of guys with pretty high lottery odds, assuming this doesn't work out long term, man. And they did all that for like kind of like basically not even half a season of Kyrie Irving. So just some food for thought, really. And what I imagined to be a pretty long offseason for the Mavs is because they were really hoping that they kind of Luka, just a bunch of kind of role players around him, just trying to make the playoffs, see what they can do there. But it's obvious. I think the roster was just flawed from the get-go. They just didn't have like a guy like who would have helped. Oh boy, Jalen Brunson. And just the thing with Jalen Brunson and all that stuff kind of frustrates me even more. I'm just getting more and more frustrated when I talk about the Mavs. But Jalen Brunson, he did have a bad playoff series against the Clippers. He shot the ball poorly, just didn't do so good. And Jalen Brunson himself did say that if the Mavericks offered him basically a minimum deal, like a 4-year, not even $30 million deal, he would have taken it, just because who knows where he could have been. But because they decided not to just give him a minimum and just let him write off the rest of the contract, He played really good, especially against the Jazz with no Luka. He played pretty good against the Suns, and then obviously they made it to the conference finals. Then, of course, he had a really good playoff performance, so the Knicks wanted him, and then the Knicks were able to get him. The Knicks obviously have a bunch of his family members. There's all that kind of nonsense going on in New York, too. But my main point is just that they had a chance to keep Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson of this roster would have been probably better than Kyrie Irving, just because Jalen Brunson doesn't need the ball 100% of the time. Like Kyrie Irving is obviously just much better handling the ball. And when you have Luka and Kyrie Irving, it's kind of, they're not good playing off each other, which obviously sucks a lot. And then they're not really two like elite defenders either. So you're having two guys who are not really engaged on the defensive side of the floor, and you're having two guys who are not gonna set screens or like trying to move around, play off ball. They're two guys that need the ball to be really effective. Obviously, when they have the ball, they're greatly effective. I'm not saying anything against what they are capable of doing when they have the ball, but my main point is they're not good playing off another superstar. Well, if you look at Jalen Brunson knows his role, and Jalen Brunson would have helped a lot more. And then because Jalen Brunson is there, he's in New York, he's doing really good things there. They got a playoff spot pretty convincingly too. And Jalen Brunson, his 4-year, a little over $100 million contract. At the time, it kind of seemed a little bit of an overpay, but because he's the best point guard the Knicks have had in like probably the century, really. So they had a really reliable point guard who's obviously the leader of their team and probably the face of their franchise. I'd say he's a little bit more reliable. Obviously, he's missed a couple more games, but he's more reliable than like a Julius Randle is. And the Mavericks could have had him for pretty cheap considering how much he was willing to take. But because they decided not to pull the trigger on that, he's over there in New York. He's doing really good things, and he could have been doing really good things with Dallas. But because Mark Cuban and all those guys over there in the front office decided not to, they kind of fumbled that. And then now Luka really has no help because he tried to overcome and save by getting Kyrie Irving. Didn't really work out either, and now they're probably not going to even make the play-in. And the play-in's the closest thing in like professional sports to like a participation trophy as it gets, and they're not going to even make it there. So, and once again, as I said before, there's some things to keep in mind when you think about what the Mavericks are going to do, maybe in like the mock drafts, and of course what they're going to do going forward. But of course, if you guys like this kind of these kind of videos, I'll make sure to like, subscribe, the whole kind of deal. I'll make sure to do, next week, I'll probably for sure do like an NBA playoff preview, check out the best matchups, best storylines, all that fun stuff. So if you want to check that out, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later.